Before, we have a lot of common sense teaching books, providing practices for beginning English teachers. But some of us may be more curious about and prefer something uncommon. And that is the reason why we have the book Uncommon Sense Teaching. Here, published in 2021. More uncommon, more updated. Actually, I came across this book while looking for an educational book and looking for some lately released one. And what really catches my eye is the title of this book, something related to brain science. Wow, so cool. But to be honest, I kind of doubted myself at the time, also because of that science aspect of the book. Science in general, still not my thing. Back to the main character of today, the book Uncommon Sense Teaching. Who are the writer of this top 10 educational book? First, Barbara Oakley, an internationally recognized expert on learning and on creating high-quality online material for massive open online courses. Lecturer of one of the world's most popular online courses, Learning How to Learn. She is also the best-selling author of A Mind for Numbers and a professor of engineering with major in neuroscience and cognitive psychology. Second, Beth Rogoski, a professor of education with postdoctoral degrees in neuroscience, 14 years of experience teaching English language arts to middle schoolers. And last, Terence Sejnowski, this professor at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, who is among only 12 living scientists who have been elected to the Institute of Medicine. So all the authors are professors in education and brain science, therefore have very profound knowledge in those fields. So now, let's take a look at what we have in the book of 2081 pages with more than 100 pages of bibliography. This book, Uncommon Sense Teaching, explains learning from a neuroscience perspective, but in less hard-to-understand terms so that you can apply to be a better instructor of most anything. The book consists of 10 chapters. The first chapter is about how our memory works and 3 techniques to strengthen neural links in our long-term memory, namely Learn It, Link It, Retrieval Practice, and Hebbian Learning. The second chapter takes a deeper look at how our working memory works, how it's helped in learning, and how our teaching address. Next, the third and the sixth chapter discover active learning in 2 pathways, declarative and procedural. Procrastination is discussed in the 4th chapter, along with tips and strategy to help learners away from procrastination. The 5th chapter provides knowledge of brain involvement and how it matters our teaching. The last 4 chapters continue with teaching strategy when it comes to building learning habits and collaborative teams, as well as develop lesson plans in both online and brick-and-mortar classes. Every chapter of the book follows the path, from addressing issues, explaining how the brain works in those situations, then strategies and tips recommended for better learning and teaching. After each chapter is a case study on how strategy and tips can be applied in specific circumstances, from which we can get a more practical insight into how those tips and strategies work. Peter Brown, co-author of Make a Stick, stated the book as a big step in translating cognitive science and neuroscience into street-level understanding of how learning works. Every teacher, student, parents will find practical ideas of immediate value. Well, I just say I doubt my ability to understand science. But for this one, you don't really need to be a master of science to understand it, at least most of the time. Anyway, this book is for educator or readers in general. So in this book, explanation is simplified and illustrated by simple words or visual aids or others so that readers can easily understand. Though I don't really get all the explanation right away, all other things are clear as day. The way problems are addressed, explanation, tips and strategy, concept and technique are drawn from insight into the brain and provided clearly enough, not using too many technical words, which really help readers like me not drown in science, neuroscience, or things like terminologies. And for me, this is a really big plus of this book. The book Uncommon Sense Teaching provides many concepts in the classroom, and one of which really impressed and so useful to me, as well is referred in most of the chapters in the book, is the term differentiation. As we all know, learning is not the same for everyone, and a one-size-fits-all approach rarely works for every brain. Why? Because working memory capacities and background knowledge can vary dramatically from student to student. How different? First, how does your working memory work? Take it as simplified like this. Working memory is like an octopus tossing a set of balls, or pieces of information. These balls bounce over and over again from the front to the back of your brain, as long as you are holding the information in working memory. An average working memory can hold up to 4 balls, and if there are more balls, then they will begin slipping from the mind. Students cannot grow more arms on their octopuses. However, some of them can hold bigger balls, while some can just reach the smaller one. That's the difference in working memory capacity and how much knowledge students can take in. Therefore, normally we can have two types of learners in the classroom: car-racer learner and hiker learner. So what to do with them? Enter differentiation. Differentiation means teaching the same content, knowledge, and skills to all students, but using different approaches to meet individual needs. Often differentiations includes adjustment in instruction, materials, and assignments. Here's where scaffolding comes into play. Scaffolded instruction is a temporary support teacher used to assist students with lesser capacity working memory, and for car-racer learners as well. Here's what scaffolding can look like for hiker learners. First, meeting with individual students or in small groups to reteach concept or skill as they may feel safer asking what they perceive to be stupid questions. Second, allow more time for them to complete a task or practice. Third, breaking down the steps of a problem by providing example for each step along the way toward completion. Finally, using criteria that match and then extend individual student skill levels. For example, being prepared with a variety of questions at different levels of difficulty. How about car-racer learners? Do they really need scaffolding? The answer is yes. First, go beyond simple factual questions with answers that right there by asking more in-depth questions and asking them to link it. Then, allow them to work with one another to bounce the idea off and challenge one another with multiple perspectives. Third, vary the types of problems to do. Instead of repetitive questions, create more complex multi-layer problems and assignments to do, or ask them to devise their own problems. And last, accelerate learning by allowing race car learners to use video game-like computer software that individualized instruction based on their responses. The ideas seem useful to individuals, but I still doubt when those two scaffolding techniques can happen in the same class with limited time. So this is only a really small part of this technique, not mentioning the whole book. I wish I had enough time to fully reflect about this. Overall, for me, this is a worth reading book. Though techniques and tips listed in this book are not really uncommon, and we can also see those techniques in our daily language classroom or in other teaching techniques book. For example, technique like think, write, pair, share, or I do, we do, you do, all really familiar. Uh, However, the way the book approached by explaining how how those techniques matter our brain work is really uncommon. And all in all, this book is like a notebook that notes down all the common and less common teaching techniques that we will find it helpful in teaching and in our maybe in our future career.